Emmanuel Lovell Webb. The name itself might not immediately resonate with everyone. Yet, for the residents of Bridgeport, Connecticut, particularly during the early 1990s, it became synonymous with a chilling fear. Webb, dubbed the Bridgeport Killer, carved a path of terror that left an indelible scar on the community. He was an unseen predator, lurking in the shadows of a city already grappling with its own challenges. His actions were not random bursts of violence. They were calculated, cruel, and targeted the vulnerable. The story of Emmanuel Webb is a stark reminder that monsters can wear the most ordinary of masks, living lives that run parallel to their horrific secret deeds, hidden in plain sight from those around them. Webb's early life offered few overt clues to the darkness that lay within. Born in Georgia on April 9, 1966, he later moved north. He arrived in Bridgeport, Connecticut in 1987 after completing his high school education. He initially lived with his sister, a seemingly normal arrangement for a young man starting out. For a time, Webb held a job as a security guard in the nearby town of Fairfield, a position of trust, ironically. He even maintained a steady relationship with a girlfriend, with whom he fathered 2 children. This facade of normalcy, of a man building a life and a family, would later make his brutal crimes all the more shocking and difficult for the community to comprehend, a chilling echo of the stranger beside me phenomenon. The terror began subtly, then escalated. Between 1990 and 1993, a series of horrifying discoveries started to plague Bridgeport's East End. Women were being murdered. The community, already facing economic hardships and urban decay in certain areas, now contended with an invisible menace. Fear was a palpable entity, especially in neighborhoods where abandoned buildings stood as silent, decaying sentinels. At this stage, the killer was a ghost, a nameless dread. Law enforcement worked tirelessly, but the connections between the cases were not immediately clear, and the perpetrator remained elusive, leaving behind a trail of grief and unanswered questions that haunted the city's residents and baffled investigators working the cases. The realization slowly dawned that a serial predator was operating within their midst. The victims were often found in desolate, forgotten places, the very locations that symbolized neglect and vulnerability. These were not crimes of passion in the conventional sense. They were acts of extreme violence and control. The community felt a profound sense of unease, understanding that the killer moved among them, perhaps a neighbor, a co-worker, or a familiar face in the crowd. This understanding fractured the sense of safety and trust, replacing it with a pervasive anxiety. The city waited, hoping for a break in the case, for an end to the nightmare that had descended upon its streets, changing daily routines and instilling a deep-seated caution. The names of Emmanuel Webb's victims in Bridgeport serve as a somber roll call of lives cut tragically short. Elizabeth Maxine Gandy, 34 years old, was taken on April 19, 1993. Sharon Cunningham, aged 39, also fell prey to his violence. Minnie Sutton, 37, and Sheila Etheridge, 29, completed the list of those he murdered in Connecticut. These women were individuals, each with her own story, hopes, and connections. They were not mere statistics in a crime wave, they were daughters, sisters, friends, and community members. Their loss created voids that could never be filled, and their memories became intertwined with the city's struggle against an unseen enemy, their faces a constant reminder of the brutality that had occurred. Webb's modus operandi was terrifyingly consistent and brutal. He sought out his victims in the neglected corners of society, often finding them in abandoned buildings or desolate lots, primarily on Bridgeport's East End. These were places where screams might go unheard, where darkness offered concealment for his heinous acts. The sequence of his attacks was marked by extreme cruelty. He would subject his victims to disfigurement, rape, and other forms of abuse before ultimately strangling them. This pattern indicated a deep-seated rage and a need for absolute control over his victims, transforming these forsaken locations into scenes of unimaginable horror, leaving investigators to piece together the grim puzzles he left behind. The specific locations chosen by Webb for his crimes became synonymous with fear. The abandoned structures and overgrown lots of Bridgeport's East End, already symbols of urban decay, were further tainted by the violence they had witnessed. These were not bustling public squares but forgotten spaces, offering him the privacy he needed to carry out his attacks without immediate interruption. The psychological impact on the surrounding neighborhoods was profound. Residents lived with the constant awareness that these ordinary, albeit neglected, parts of their environment had been stages for such savage acts. Each new discovery sent fresh waves of terror through the community, reinforcing the sense of a predator skillfully using the city's vulnerabilities. His reign of terror was not confined solely to Connecticut. In 1994, Webb's violent trajectory led him back to his home state of Georgia. There he claimed another life, Evelyn Charity, a 37-year-old woman. This murder, while geographically removed from Bridgeport, bore the hallmarks of his established pattern of violence against women. It demonstrated that his predatory instincts were not tied to a single location, but were a fundamental part of his being. This expansion of his criminal activity, though it would eventually lead to his initial capture, also highlighted the terrifying mobility and adaptability of such offenders, capable of striking in different environments while maintaining their core methods of operation. The first significant break in Emmanuel Webb's destructive path came not in Connecticut, but in Georgia. In July 1994, he was arrested for the murder of Evelyn Charity. The full scope of his brutality, particularly his Connecticut crimes, was not yet known to the authorities handling this specific case. Webb, perhaps strategically, pleaded guilty to a series of lesser charges related to Charity's death, involuntary manslaughter, robbery and theft of a motor vehicle. This plea resulted in a 20-year prison sentence. While justice was served for Evelyn Charity, the families of his Bridgeport victims remained without answers, unaware that their tormentor was already behind bars for a separate, though related offense, a common frustration in complex serial cases. Webb was released from his Georgia prison sentence on parole in late 2001. Freedom, however, was conditional. It was a subsequent parole violation that proved to be the critical turning point in uncovering his full criminal history. As is standard procedure in many jurisdictions for parolees, especially those with violent offenses, a DNA sample was collected from Webb. This routine action, part of the broader efforts to build criminal DNA databases, would ultimately bridge the gap between his past and present, and connect him to the cold cases that still haunted Bridgeport. Little did he know that this biological fingerprint would unravel the secrets he had kept hidden for so many years. The DNA sample taken from Webb was processed and compared against national databases, which included evidence from unsolved crimes. This is where science delivered the justice that years of traditional investigation had struggled to achieve. Webb's DNA profile was irrefutably linked to the evidence collected from the murder scenes of Elizabeth Gandy, Sharon Cunningham, Minnie Sutton, and Sheila Etheridge in Bridgeport. It was a watershed moment for the investigators who had worked these cases, and for the families who had waited so long for closure. The invisible thread connecting these brutal crimes finally had a name and a face, a testament to the relentless power of forensic science in resolving even the coldest of cases. The legal machinery in Connecticut then moved into action. Faced with the undeniable DNA evidence, Emmanuel Lovell Webb's options were limited. In May 2008, he stood before the court and pled no contest to the murders of 3 of his Bridgeport victims, Gandy, Cunningham, and Sutton. This plea, while not an admission of guilt, acknowledged that the state had sufficient evidence to convict him. For these horrific crimes, he received a 60-year prison sentence, ensuring he would likely spend the remainder of his life incarcerated. The case against him for the murder of Sheila Etheridge was ultimately dropped, a decision often made for strategic prosecutorial reasons when convictions on other counts guarantee a lengthy sentence, focusing resources effectively. The news of Emmanuel Webb's definitive link to the Bridgeport murders and his subsequent sentencing brought a complex wave of emotions to the community. There was profound relief that a dangerous predator was finally and securely removed from society. Yet, this relief was intermingled with renewed grief for the victims and their families, as the details of their suffering were brought back into the public consciousness. The revelation that Webb had lived a seemingly ordinary life, working, maintaining relationships, raising children, while committing such monstrous acts was deeply unsettling. It reinforced the chilling reality that the most dangerous individuals can be those who blend seamlessly into the fabric of everyday life, their darkness hidden just beneath the surface. This case powerfully underscores the monumental importance of DNA evidence in the pursuit of justice, particularly in solving cold cases that have languished for years, even decades. For the families of Webb's victims, DNA technology provided answers that might have otherwise remained elusive forever. It transformed faint hopes into concrete proof, allowing the legal system to hold him accountable long after the crimes were committed. The meticulous work of forensic scientists, combined with the persistence of investigators, ensured that Webb could not escape the consequences of his actions. It serves as a powerful example of how scientific advancements can bring closure and ensure that justice, though delayed, is not denied. Reflecting on Webb's double life offers a disturbing insight into the psychology of such offenders. The ability to compartmentalize, to present a benign facade to the world while engaging in horrific acts of violence, is a hallmark of many serial criminals. He was a security guard, a role ostensibly about protection, yet he was a brutal violator. He was a father, yet he destroyed other families. This juxtaposition challenges our assumptions about how evil manifests and highlights the difficulty in identifying such predators before they strike. The stranger beside me is not just a literary trope, it is a terrifying reality that communities must grapple with, fostering vigilance without succumbing to paranoia. Emmanuel Lovell Webb is currently serving his 60-year sentence confined within prison walls, his capacity to inflict further harm neutralized. However, the scars he left on the Bridgeport community and on the families of Elizabeth Gandy, Sharon Cunningham, Minnie Sutton, Sheila Etheridge, and Evelyn Charity remain. Their lives, and the collective memory of the city, were irrevocably altered by his reign of terror. Ongoing discussions about his case often revolve around the need for victim support, the importance of cold case units, and the enduring value of forensic science. Remembering these events and the lives lost is crucial not only for honoring the victims, but also for maintaining a societal vigilance against the predators who walk among us, often unseen until it is too late.